to enjoy one another in every way possible. Drusus was born only 3 months after her marriage to Octavian, eliciting ironic comments from people about how only the most fortunate couples were able to have children in 3 months. For Livia, it had been a traumatic birth, and she had asked her husband to refrain from relations until she had fully recovered. This hadn't been a problem for Octavian. At that time, he had been engaged in the war against Sextus Pompeius, the hardest he had yet undertaken, and he had spent little time in Rome, and never more than a fleeting night with his consort. In addition, the young triumvir returned from these expeditions against that cur Pompey, feeling so low in spirits that he didn't actually feel much desire to exercise his marital duties. What with the defeats, naval disasters, conspiracies, and betrayals, he had even reached the point of contemplating the idea of suicide. And if it had not been for his trusted bodyguard, Ortwin, he would never have had the chance to emerge victorious from that long conflict, during which he had also taken the opportunity to rid himself of the third triumvir, Lepidus, by removing his possessions and official titles and relegating him to the position of Pontifex Maximus. When the war against Pompey had ended, and peace had returned to Rome, however, and the Senate had voted him Sacrosanctitas, and awarded him a triumph, Octavian had expected everything to return to normal at home too, and that when they were once again intimate, the preliminaries would be followed by the complete act. Livia had let him try, but then stopped him, saying that she was still experiencing some pain. She felt a burning sensation, she said, her face assuming a pained expression that had induced Octavian to stop. They had tried again several times over the following days, but always with the same disagreeable result. The triumvir had her examined by his personal physician, who had been unable to find any actual physical problem. Livia had nothing wrong with her. She simply claimed that, after her last childbirth, she experienced terrible pain while having full intercourse. Octavian had tried to resign himself to the idea and to accept that was the way things were, and Livia had worked hard to please him in all other possible ways. But this had only postponed the problem. For the young triumvir, marriage could not simply be a matter of sex, but must also, and above all, be one of procreation. If he had only wanted Livia as a lover, he wouldn't have forced her husband to divorce her in order to marry her. The wars had gone on for a long time, and for years he had contented himself with what Livia had been able to offer him. But now that he looked beyond the contingent necessities to the construction of the empire, the future, and the inevitable war with the other triumvir Mark Antony, the need for heirs became more and more pressing. Octavian was happy that, thanks to the fortune bestowed upon him by the gods and the precious friends who had helped him, in just over 8 years he had reached a position of power and obtained victories unthinkable for a man of his age and his weak physical constitution. Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, who he had known since childhood and who had permitted him to triumph over Antony and Decimus Brutus in the War of Modena, against Marcus Brutus and Cassio in Philippi, against Lucius Antony and Fulvia in the War of Perugia, against Sextus Pompeius in the battles of Milazzo and Naulochus, and Gaius Cilnius Maecenas, whose political plotting had led to him becoming consul at only 19 years of age and triumvir at 20. Making him the absolute master of the Roman West. With them and his sister Octavia, Mark Antony's bride, the 2 Germans Ortwin and Veleda, who had fought alongside Julius Caesar, the tribune Popilius Laenas, with Livia, with her cousin Lucius Pinarius, and with the others who had given their life to the cause or had betrayed them during those 8 years, he had formed the sect of Mars Ultor, the god of revenge. The most lethal of weapons for avenging the death of his adoptive father and executing all those who had dared raise a dagger against him that terrible day of the Ides of March 8 years earlier, and the most effective way to pursue his work of reforming a collapsing state and creating the most powerful empire that had ever existed.